It looks like you're already the host, Tim.
All right. I don't need to claim host. Hello, today is January 26th, 2021. Holy cats. This is the standard SIG Cluster Lifecycle call. Let me punch up the agenda here. All right. I will share my screen. Have we passed the point of submitting sessions for KubeCon? We have not. For the virtual KubeCon EU.
I think we have a couple more weeks.
All right. So we should probably do the PSA then. We should submit our sessions for the KubeCon. Usually we coordinate via here. Do we have folks that wanted to submit? Because the SIG calls, there's like usually a limited number, or at least there were before. I don't know who's coordinating it anymore because I know Nancy has switched roles. So do we have folks that wanted to do a session for KubeCon? There's usually main SIG, then there's like sub-project.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
All right, yeah. So we discussed this topic last time. Basically, we kind of arrived at a decision to send an email to the mailing list. And if a sub-project wants to send a session according to the latest guideline from the CNCF, they can do that without the agreement of the SIG.
Okay.
The sub-projects are, in a way, eligible to do that.
Mhm.
So what I didn't do in that email is to at least ask the people who are sending a session to drop us an email to say, hey, we are sending a session for that, just so you know. So maybe I can send another email in the same thread to kindly ask people to do that. I don't know if anybody on this call is sending a session. Can you just let us know now?
Minikube hasn't sent one yet, but I think we plan on it. So I'll let you guys know when I do that.
Okay, Fabrizio or Jason, do you know if Cluster API is sending?
I'm going to raise the point to the next CAPI meeting, so we coordinate there.
Okay, for KubeIDM, I don't think we're sending one. There's a lot of planning we have to do in this cycle to find a roadmap. And I don't think me or Fabrizio will volunteer to present for KubeIDM for this KubeCon.
Okay. All right. The next couple topics are you then, so I think we can probably move on. So the action item is to drop a reminder. Minikube said they're going to send one. Fabrizio said he's going to bring it up during the next KubeCon call, or sorry, next Cluster API call. And then KubeIDM isn't going to do one. So I don't think we need to belabor the point here. We can just follow up asynchronously.
Yeah, the main SIG call, me and Justin asked if somebody else wants to take over the presentation for this KubeCon. We haven't gotten a reply yet. I mean, I can just ping the same thread and see if somebody replies this time.
I might try to use it as a forcing function for me to make a presentation. So let's see here. What's the due date again for this?
9th of February, I think.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Lubomir, you got the next topics.
Yeah, this is something that I think the Cluster API provider for Nested opened as a discussion some time ago, that we are not very consistent in the naming of our YouTube videos. So we sent a message to Contribex asking for feedback. Looks like the current guide they have is outdated. And we sort of discussed between three people what the naming of YouTube videos for the whole Kubernetes project should be. It is pretty much the format we arrived to is SIG, the name of the SIG, and potentially the name of the meeting with a dash in front of it. If it's the main SIG call, you don't include any of that. And in the end, there is the date, which is sort of different of what Zoom produces. Zoom doesn't have the dashes between years and month and day. So basically, whoever uploads a video has to edit the name if they want to be consistent. I don't know if does anybody have comments about the naming?
I don't care. I think that having some level of consistency might help if people are searching for things.
Yeah, and frankly, given a video is part of a playlist already, the SIG prefix is kind of redundant. But I don't know.
It's fine because it makes it easier to search. At least there's consistency. So if a person just types in the raw search outside of the playlist, they'll be able to find it easier maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I'm going to start trying to name some of these in the future, and yeah, we encourage the sub projects to do that as well.
Yeah, I think just take it to the list and with a recommendation, and we'll see what happens. I'm sure people won't follow it for a while, and then we'll have to follow up again. All right, you got the next topics for Lubomir.
So the Kate's Infra Working Group has started migrating the GCS and GCR repositories / buckets we use for CI artifacts. And below you can see the changes that will happen. In fact, we already support these new repositories and buckets, but we realized that some new artifacts are missing in there. So there's a PR to fix that. You can see the progress in the tracking issue. There is the Kates.io repository ticket. I think it's safe to do the GCR change already, but the Kates release dev one was problematic, and I think it's still pending a certain fix. But once that issue is resolved, which will probably happen in the 121 cycle, you should just be ready to migrate both images and binaries if you're downloading them from the GCS.
Okay, any questions, comments, complaints there?
And I'm hoping that they also announce this like more widely, because I found out about this. Aaron whispered me on a GitHub issue. Without that, I wouldn't have known that we are making the switch. So I'm hoping that this will reach Kubernetes devs.
Well, it has to, you have to broadcast this because every person who's consuming it, all the documentation and everything else needs to be updated. So
yeah, I think one argument is that especially SIG release assume that there are not a lot of people consuming the CA artifacts. In a way, we treat them as internal consumption artifacts, but I think that's not the case. Maybe that there's always somebody consuming Kubernetes CI for some reason.
All right. Well, I think follow up on an email thread to the broader group, but I don't necessarily know. It'd be nice to know the scope of the potential view of the impact, because I do think there are people who consume, especially people who do like federated testing and whatnot, who do consume the artifacts for CI to do their federated testing. So I don't know how that changes, right?
Yeah, we should get some signal from the same consumers. Currently, we don't know if somebody is doing this or not.
All right, but I think we can move on as long as we send an email to follow up. Do you want to go to sub-project updates? You got the next one again, Lumir.
Yeah, so for kubeADM, we had a planning session last week. It was only me and Fabrizio who joined the call. Not many participants in the kubeADM meetings recently. We basically discussed the pending work me and Fabrizio are planning for 121, which is not that much. But the next call, we are going to try formalizing a roadmap for kubeADM, which is going to be like a document, something like a plan for the future. If somebody is interested, please join the call so that you can help us with this discussion.
You might want to broadcast that to the email list. I think that would be a good. I mean, you want if you're having an attendance like fall off, I think broadcasting to the email list as well as maybe even to Devel might not be a bad way of saying like, hey, if you're interested in engaging, do the one part outreach, one part roadmap planning.
Yeah, agreed. I will send a mail before this meeting so that more people see it.
All right. It's funny because like after you get past the hype cycle for these projects, you almost go into like maintenance mode, right? Like it works now, and there you have a lot of users, so they kind of view it as this trusty thing that they use, not realizing that to maintain this thing requires effort and energy.
kubeADM has a lot of technical depth that it's one of my long-term goals to try to solve that, and new features are less of a focus for me. But yeah, we have to fix a lot of things. It's not the project is not in a final state.
Yep. Fabrizio?
Hi,
Yeah,
everyone.
sorry, I wanted to add the couple of other items here. This is just a couple of updates that we're working with SIG Scalability and SIG Windows to either add new signal for kubeADM in scale testing, or currently we have some problems in the kubeADM on Windows tests. For both of these, we're using GCE as the platform, so it's a bit slow to debug in the cloud infrastructure, but we're still doing the best we can to get this signal in a good shape.
Are they going to get rid of the legacy scale tests?
So to my understanding is that long term they want to do that, but this is likely going to be like a kubeADM test that coexists in parallel to the existing one for a while. Basically, we want to get parity between what kubeup can do today, which is, kubeup is like Coaster API pretty much. It's a provider, it's a bootstrapper, it's everything. And I think they want to basically remove parts of that so that we can get kubeADM at least as the bootstrapper. And see if we can configure kubeadm the same way kubeup is being configured today. You know, it's bash, so it's very configurable, but at the same time, it's difficult to maintain. So I think they really want to make this switch.
All right, that's good. Are people actually driving that change, or they just try to they just logged issues on it?
So I'm working with some of the Polish developers who work at Google, like Wojciech and some of his team, to get this going. We currently work on some testing for semantics, but this is going well thus far.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. We can move on. Fabricio, want to go?
So quick update from Cluster API. We are starting work on V1 Alpha 4. The work is taking speed. And I would like to point out some initiatives that are relevant and are ongoing. So the first one is the Cluster API provider operator. We merged the CAP, and the work is starting for implementing this operator that will allow basically GitOps style for the management cluster. Then there is also a PR from Metal Cube Folks, which is implementing the scale-in strategy for KCP. And this will allow basically to upgrade your control plane in a bare metal scenario where you don't have a spare machine to use for the upgrade. But the implementation, of course, will work also with other providers. And last but not least, the load balancer proposal. So the pluggable load balancer proposal is making good progress. Thank you to Jason, Nadir, and Yassine, and all the other folks which are working on this effort.
That's good. Any questions, comments, complaints, concerns for Fabrizio? Great, Justin?
Thank you. Yes. So on KOps, the primary thing that happened that's of cross-project interest is we found this, or an issue was reported against us that turns out to be an Ubuntu issue or a kernel issue. But if you're seeing incredibly slow downloads from GCS or in general anywhere with relatively long round trip time, then you might want to look at the sort of thread and workaround. It turns out to be a fairly simple workaround, we think, but it's been a long-running one that is incredibly confusing for anyone like me that does not really understand TCP networking.
Yay, newer is better, right?
Always better. Always onwards and upwards.
Yeah, never sideways or backwards. Yeah, so that's amusing. I did see I think I can share this information. We did some profiling internally for other issues with regards to total throughput performance for certain sets of operations with regards to newer Ubuntu kernels. And we did see appreciable slowdown on sets of operations within the newer kernels, which we thought was fascinating. But there's not like public facing information I can point people at. So this is kind of another data point that resonates with that information that we have. So one thing that we talked about scalability testing, one thing that might be interesting is that we used to, in fact, I believe Jay and I wrote the tests so long ago that I forgot, but I don't think they were blocking. But there were round trip latency performance tests that were created. And I think the reason why they were never turned on by default instead of blocking CI is it's subject to all the whims and follies of providers. But there are end-to-end tests, or at least there were, I don't know if there still are, that basically do sort of low-level latency tests. And I believe that, back when I worked at Red Hat, we actually used that for blocking signal for CI on the downstream product to make sure that there wasn't regression in certain behaviors for the CNI and kernel. So that might be interesting from a COPS perspective, because you primarily focus on AWS, but that's not the only provider. But it might be interesting to put that in the battery.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Also, we actually have our first KOps specific tests. We've moved to kubetest 2, or are moving to kubetest 2. And so we can actually start to introduce our own tests now and can do something like that. The other thing I thought of is there is I don't know if it's a scalability test, but there is a test which at least produces numbers on API server latency. Again, I don't think it's blocking, but maybe we could borrow some of their machinery to sort of track regressions there.
Yep. Yeah, there was a whole set of tests that we created. I don't know if the problem with them is a lot of non-blocking tests got ripped out and everything got changed. So I don't know if they're still there or not. I'd have to dig, but they were underneath the networking piece. All right, next up, Sharif.
Yeah. Yeah. So Minicube's main goals this quarter are fully supporting ARM on Linux and Darwin platforms. We now release an ARM64 binary for Linux machines. And the other one is we want to migrate to having our default container runtime inside of Minikube be Containerd instead of Docker, but still allow users to build Docker images like they expect to with a Docker daemon. So the 1.17 release went out last week and now has an ARM binary, and we support ARM for the Docker driver and the Podman driver. And that's basically the big stuff. There's other things like we support a way to SSH into external clusters and treat them like Minikube clusters and stuff like that.
Any questions? Are there any other topics that folks want to discuss? Because we are kind of at the end of our agenda. Going once, twice, 3 times. I think there's one thing I was thinking about doing for a while, and I think this might be beneficial, is it relates to the outreach. But what might be interesting, which is something we haven't really done, we've done surveys. But one thing I was thinking about is maybe the idea of setting up like a listening session. You know how like the CNCF basically has like a session where they kind of have people come to the party to talk about their incantations. It might be interesting to set up as a SIG level to have like a listening session with people who are deeply invested or using our projects, kind of do an outreach with the CNCF to see if like we can get direct feedback from what's working well, what's not working, if they had a laundry list of things, just a smaller sort of, what am I thinking for, a focus group that can talk about the pitfalls, the issues, the other things that they may like to see. I know folks have thoughts about that, but I've been pondering that for a while now. Go ahead, Jason.
I think
this is so small.
I think that'd be wonderful. I think like that's something we've lost with the current format of the of KubeCons. We used to get some of that at KubeCon, but we've lost the back channel, the return channel, I guess.
I saw Jason and Lubomir.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo kind of what Justin said. I think it's a great idea. The only thing I wonder is, does it make sense to kind of scope it down at some level to certain sub-projects? Because it might get a little crazy if we try to do all of the sub-projects at once and get a little noisy and distracting.
Well, I think the thing I want to get feedback on is that like to actually build a full production and deployment, Like I want to hear the pieces that they're using, why they're using X, Y, and Z, and understand their user stories of where the edges are for certain things. Because like if you go to like large enterprises, when you talk to them, they have like a cacophony of madness. Like they have every project, pieces of projects at different layers of the stack, and they have build their own at different layers too. So it'd be interesting to get like their take on why they made certain choices and stuff. All right, Lubomir?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments about this. I really like the idea. The first time I encountered something like that was during the LTS working group session where they invited a certain European shoe manufacturer that has gigantic clusters in Europe. And it was probably one of the best Zoom calls in Kubernetes I ever joined. And then they stopped. And I haven't seen any other SIG do something like that or a group. I think this is very valuable. And I think the project has high level of disconnect between consumers and the maintainers.
Oh yeah, absolutely does. That's like water's wet. Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, something else is that I agree with Jason that we probably shouldn't unify a single, a 60-minute Zoom call for a lot of different sub-project consumers, but we can do it. I mean, it's probably going to end up like a session where people are just reporting COPS and kubeadm bugs or something like that, which we don't like to end up having. So maybe a way to approach such a meeting would be to first sort of qualify a certain consumer as eligible to join the call and present their use case and everything.
All right, it sounds like we should probably do a little more homework on this, but why don't I start to draft a document here? Because I think that the community and the consumers would benefit from this sort of style of engagement, because a lot of times there's like an intermediary or a set of intermediaries in between where you don't get that direct feedback. I do know of some key high-level, high-profile customers or consumers who might be interested in doing that, like the T-Mobile folks. They've already sort of engaged on a number of fronts. There's AT&T, there's Walmart and Walmart Labs. So, and there's of course Apple now. So I think that might be a good way for us to start to get that feedback loop cranking. Right. Any other last topics? Going once, twice, 3 times. Right. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.